Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're embarking on a fascinating deep dive into a collection of really compelling stories from the day's sources. We'll navigate through the complexities of electoral challenges, journey into some groundbreaking medical advancements, and also explore significant geopolitical shifts in green energy. Our mission, as always, is to extract those essential nuggets of knowledge for you, giving you that shortcut to being truly well-informed. We've organized today's insights into three distinct sections. We'll kick off with the editorial pieces, then move into the science section, and wrap up with a major topic from the broader text section. So yeah, let's jump right into our first editorial. All right, first up, we're looking into the Election Commission of India's, the ECI's Special Intensive Revision, or SIR, of electoral rolls in Bihar. Basically, a focused effort to update voter lists. The article describes the ECI as being caught in a trilemma, meaning it's sort of battling pressures from political parties, citizens, and the judiciary all at once. What exactly is this avoidable mess they apparently found themselves in?
Well, what's really surprising here is that the ECI's effort, which seems perfectly laudable on the surface, to purify electoral rolls, actually faced this fierce barrage of opposition. Their goal was simple: include all the eligible people and exclude the ineligible. They were working under the assumption that some ineligible individuals had somehow gotten onto the rolls, even slipped through past revisions. But this whole attempt, despite the ECI's known capability for managing these, gigantic exercises like enrolling 1 billion people, it really backfired quite significantly. It kind of suggests a fundamental misstep in how they approached it.
Yeah, the author uses this really striking analogy, compares it to asking for a marriage certificate after years of happy married life with children as proof of a legal union.
Yeah.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it, of questioning something long established. And yet, like you said, this is an institution that's widely respected for its huge operational capacity. So how did such a capable body end up inviting this kind of, backlash?
The central issue really seems to be the sudden and maybe rather heavy-handed announcement of this so-called purge in Bihar that immediately invited these unpleasant reactions. Now, in response, the ECI has eased up on some of the stringent procedures. For instance, people enrolled after 2003 can now use their parents' entries from the 2003 rolls for citizenship claims. That's a change. And booth-level officers, the BLOs, they can now accept forms without some of the previously prescribed documents. This relaxation apparently boosted daily submissions quite a bit, which, allowed the ECI to claim success and sort of deflate the complaints, at least on the surface.
But the article makes it pretty clear that significant questions are still hanging out there, especially about how these ease procedures will actually, work on the ground. I mean, how can BLOs genuinely recommend inclusions without the proper documents? And then how will the electoral registration officers accurately decide eligibility in those cases? It seems tricky. And if they start expanding the list of accepted documents, things like Aadhaar or the EBR card, does that just verify identity or does it truly confirm citizenship, which is a much, much deeper claim, right? So when we talk about measuring success here, what criteria should we actually be looking at? What does success even mean in this context?
Yeah, zooming out, the article really puts that question front and center. What defines success for the ECI here? Is it just going to be measured by the number of, quote, duly filled forms and electors readmitted, or should it be measured by the number of supposedly ineligible individuals who are ultimately disenfranchised? That's a very different metric. And a really critical point raised is this idea of the presumption of citizenship for anyone already on that 2003 list. That implies a pretty broad acceptance of their status. So the big question is whether the government is actually prepared to accept this broad presumption, especially given the original stated intent of the exercise. This whole process puts a significant burden on the ECI, and whether it can genuinely ensure fair verification rather than just, hitting statistical targets, that really remains to be seen. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? At what point does this pursuit of purity inadvertently create more confusion than clarity?
Okay, let's transition now from electoral processes to some critical issues of security. Our next piece zeroes in on Jammu and Kashmir. The lieutenant governor recently emphasized eradicating terrorism as a top priority, urging the J&K police to leverage modern technology. Fair enough. But the article suggests a crucial, maybe less obvious asset in this fight, the local police, specifically operating under state command. What's the core argument here? Why is that local control seen as so important?
Well, a really powerful point the article makes is this well-established fact that local or state police forces are fundamentally the core of counterterror operations.
Right.
Central forces usually just play a supplementary role. Their unique strength comes from being rooted right there in the region. They have intimate knowledge of the terrain, the local demographics. That's invaluable. But maybe even more importantly, they possess this intangible asset, a deep connection with the local population. And that connection is absolutely vital for gathering high-grade intelligence, which, as you know, is the lifeblood of any effective counterterrorism effort. The article even points to that Pahalgam strike on April 22, 2025, suggesting a potential gap in human intelligence prior to it, underscoring this exact point.
Right, the human intelligence aspect. So the suggestion is to put the J&K police under the command of an elected government. That connection with elected representatives, it sounds crucial. But how does local democratic oversight specifically enhance security? What's the mechanism there, and what kind of impact does that have on, say, intelligence gathering?
That's a critical piece. Locals, generally speaking, often feel far more comfortable sharing sensitive information with their elected representatives, maybe a sarpendant in a village or their MLA, than they might with someone from a central agency who can sometimes seem more distant, perhaps less accountable to them directly. So the article strongly advocates for restoring the full democratic structure in J&K, activating all tiers from the panchayats right up to MLAs and MPs and making them directly responsible for security in their areas. If this connection isn't reestablished, the article warns you risk this creeping indifference, first from the representatives and then, by extension, from the local population itself. And that kind of detachment, well, that would be incredibly detrimental to counterterrorism. Trust and cooperation are just paramount.
Okay, so what would be the practical outcome then for the listener, for the actual residents of J&K? What difference would the shift make to daily life and the overall security situation?
Well, looking at the broader implications, placing the J&K police under an elected government could significantly improve accountability and responsiveness to community needs. That's key. This would help ensure that policing strategies are actually aligned with local aspirations, rather than just being perceived as top-down directives from somewhere else. Elected officials, they can genuinely bridge that gap between the police and the community, fostering a level of trust that's absolutely vital for effective law enforcement and, again, intelligence gathering. The article basically posits that just holding elections is, quote, a unfinished agenda if a true participatory governance model isn't also granted. And it suggests that a genuinely improved security situation would naturally follow from empowering the local population and their representatives. It really highlights the idea, doesn't it, that true security isn't just about force, but it's deeply tied to connection and collaboration.
That was a really deep look into the political and security landscapes. Now, let's shift gears completely. Let's explore a topic that touches pretty much everyone. How social media is influencing our understanding of health and wellness. I mean, whether it's detox waters, collagen supplements, magnesium for seemingly everything. For theoretically everything, if you're like many people, you've probably encountered these trends online. And the global health and wellness market is just massive hit, $1.4 trillion in 2024. But the big question is, how accurate is the information floating around out there, really?
Yeah, what's particularly striking here is this contrast. While people are genuinely, it seems, prioritizing wellness and actively seeking science-backed products, social media, just by its very nature, tends to thrive on black and white thinking. Simple answers, quick fixes, but nutrition science. It's almost never black and white. It's really all about context, dose, and individuality. What works for one person might not work for another. The article actually cites a peer-reviewed study involving Indian students. It found that social media significantly influences eating behaviors. It triggers immediate food consumption, intensifies cravings, encourages participation in food trends. Yet, and this is crucial, the participants often struggled to assess whether the information they were consuming was actually evidence-based. So this creates a real challenge for making informed decisions about your health.
Right. And we've all probably seen those countless videos promoting, natural as epic concoctions, things like blending cucumber and bitter gourd for rapid weight loss. Sounds easy, but the experts quoted in the article strongly warn against these. So what's the core issue with this whole idea of expecting food as a cure or looking for these quick fixes from diet alone?
A really vital clarification from the experts is this. While good, wholesome food certainly supports the body's immune system and overall health, food cannot act like medicine in the same way a pharmaceutical drug does. It's a different mechanism. Take the example of vitamin C in oranges. Your body only utilizes what it needs at that moment, and the rest is simply, well, excreted, and it doesn't store up like a medicine dose. As one expert puts it quite succinctly, glow comes from nourishment, not gimmicks. It's about consistent, healthy habits. Similarly, those traditional kitchen ingredients, they're fantastic in culinary doses for flavor, basic nutrition. But to expect them to cure obesity or diabetes is taking it too far. That's not their role. Real sustainable weight loss, for example, it's a complex interplay. It requires consistent exercise, effective stress management, and crucially, maintaining a healthy calorie balance over time. It's definitely not about one single magic ingredient you saw online.
It also seems like social media has this knack for creating fear around certain foods, doesn't it? Sugar and carbohydrates, for example, have gotten a remarkably bad reputation in recent years, and that leads some people to take pretty extreme measures, like entirely cutting them out. But what does actual established science say about these seemingly bad food groups? Are they really that villainous?
Well, if you look at the broader scientific consensus, institutions like the Mayo Clinic and Johns Hopkins have pretty clear guidelines. The Mayo Clinic states people need at least 130 grams of carbohydrates daily. And Johns Hopkins notes that our bodies fundamentally run on sugar, specifically glucose, which is primarily derived from these carbohydrates. So removing natural sources entirely, it's simply not healthy. The article emphasizes a really crucial point here. The diet that works for, say, a 22-year-old actor in Bollywood is unlikely to be the right fit for a 45-year-old working mother in Delhi. It's common sense, but easily forgotten online. This highlights that factors like your genetics, your unique gut microbiome, your lifestyle, stress levels, even your cultural background, they all profoundly determine what works best for your individual body. And it's also worth remembering, that randomized controlled trials, or RCTs, are the gold standard for understanding nutrition. They establish cause and effect. Yet so many claims you see on social media are based only on observational studies, which can show a correlation, sure, but not necessarily causation. It really drives home the message that personalized nutrition, guided by reliable science, not trends, is key.
Okay, moving on to our next piece in the science section. This one shifts to a truly hopeful and potentially transformative development in medical science. For anyone living with type 1 diabetes, every single day involves constant vigilance, doesn't it? Tracking blood sugar, adjusting insulin doses, bracing for those unpredictable highs and lows. And even with the best technology currently available, it just can't fully replicate the intricate function of a healthy pancreas. But what if we could actually replace what's missing? Not with a transplant from a donor, but with something grown in a lab.
Yes, this is really quite revolutionary. We're talking about a small clinical trial, but one reported in the very prestigious New England Journal of Medicine. It tested a therapy called Zimilicel. Now, what are these? They're essentially stem cell-derived islet cells, so the actual insulin-producing cells of the pancreas, but grown in a laboratory environment from stem cells. In this trial, these lab-grown cells were infused into the liver of 12 people who had severe, long-standing type 1 diabetes. And the amazing result was that these infused cells actually started producing insulin again. This led to significantly improved blood sugar control and, very importantly, it prevented those dangerous hypoglycemic lows. It's a really significant step forward.
Wow, that sounds absolutely incredible. How does this approach, using lab-grown cells, compare to the more traditional islet cell transplants, the ones that use cells from deceased donors, which have been around for a while? What makes Zimicell different?
That's a great question because, yes, traditional donor transplants can work. They can reduce or even eliminate the need for external insulin. But they face some really substantial practical and logistical hurdles. As one expert in the article points out, once the pancreas is removed from the donor, the clock starts ticking. The window to extract enough viable islets is very narrow, and it requires highly specialized labs. Supply is also limited. The big innovation with Zimicell is precisely that scientists grow these insulin-producing islets from what are called pluripotent stem cells in the lab. They're not harvesting them from scarce donor organs. The goal is for these lab-grown cells to take root in the body, specifically after being infused into the hepatic portal vein, that's the main vein leading directly to the liver, and start producing insulin internally. So this approach could potentially sidestep many of the supply chain and logistical challenges associated with donor organs.
Okay, and the trial participants themselves, they lived with type 1 diabetes for over 2 decades, right? With no detectable insulin production of their own, and frequently experiencing severe hypoglycemic events. So those are tough cases. What were the key results after they received this Zimicell therapy?
The results were genuinely exciting, yes. All 12 participants began producing C-peptide, which is a very reliable marker indicating the body is making its own insulin within just 90 days of the infusion. That's quite fast. And crucially, those C-peptide levels more than doubled by day 365, so a year later. And alongside that, their blood sugar control improved significantly. Now, they did require an immunosuppressive regimen that's needed to prevent their bodies from rejecting these new cells. But the regimen used was notable because it was free of glucocorticoids, a type of steroid often linked to more severe side effects. Phase 3 trials are actually underway now with 50 participants, and they'll be followed for 5 years to assess long-term safety and efficacy. So, looking at the broader impact, this study really marks a genuinely promising step forward in a field that has seen remarkably slow progress over the last 70 years. Feels like a real potential breakthrough. However, important questions about its ultimate cost and the long-term implications and side effects of needing lifelong immunosuppression, those will certainly remain key considerations if and when it eventually reaches the market. But it definitely opens up new possibilities beyond just managing symptoms.
All right, and finally today, let's turn our attention to the text section, focusing on global power dynamics, specifically China's incredible, almost breathtaking ascent in the green energy sector. The numbers mentioned are truly staggering. China installed more wind turbines and solar panels in 2024 than every other nation on Earth combined. That's huge. This isn't just about environmental goals, clearly. It's a massive geopolitical power play unfolding. How exactly did they manage to achieve such dominance and at such an unprecedented scale and speed?
It really is a remarkable story, and it's one of strategic foresight combined with massive, sustained investment. China's renewable energy revolution isn't an overnight success. It's the direct result of decades of very deliberate state planning. In 2024 alone, just to put a number on it, they poured a staggering $940 billion into the sector. Now, compare that to India's $3.4 billion investment in the same period. It just dwarfs it. And beyond the sheer scale of investment, China also strategically dominates the entire renewable energy supply chain. We're talking from the foundational raw materials like polysilicon for solar panels and lithium for batteries, all the way through to the manufacturing of the panels themselves, the wind turbines, and the advanced batteries that are critical for storing this energy. This vertically integrated approach gives them unparalleled control over costs and production efficiency.
Interesting. And the article points out that beyond the obvious climate goals and clear economic ambition, this was also driven, quite profoundly, by a response to a severe domestic crisis. You had extremely high air pollution, making many major cities almost unlivable, coupled with deep concerns about energy security due to their heavy reliance on coal and foreign oil imports. So how do they manage to pivot so effectively, to transform such a dire internal challenge into this massive global opportunity that we see now?
It really speaks volumes about their strategic ingenuity, doesn't it? The 11th five-year plan back in 2006, that was a really pivotal moment. It elevated renewable energy to a national strategic priority. And crucially, they backed it up with concrete legislation like the Renewable Energy Law. But a key factor, maybe the key factor in their rapid deployment was the prominent role played by state-owned enterprises, the SOEs, and the public sector banks. These state-backed entities were able to provide enormous loans and deploy projects at incredible speed, often unconstrained by the kind of financial limitations or quarterly profit pressures typically faced by private sector companies in other parts of the world. As one representative quoted in the article notes, the state-led approach allowed for scale effects that private enterprises cannot achieve, letting them build massive capacity very, very quickly.
So it's clearly this potent blend of top-down state coordination, but also harnessing a surprising amount of market dynamism within that framework, and even extending their global reach through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, right? But even with such a powerful, centrally driven blueprint, were there any significant bumps along the road? Or is it a completely smooth upward trajectory?
Oh no, it definitely wasn't without its challenges. If you look at the bigger picture, back in the mid-2010s, for instance, China's incredibly aggressive installation rate actually outpaced their national grid's ability to absorb all that new energy. That led to significant problems with energy curtailment, basically, having to shut down wind turbines or solar farms because the grid couldn't handle the power. It was wasted clean energy. And some haphazard subsidy policies early on also encouraged, perhaps, some wasteful expansion without enough planning. But Beijing responded quite decisively. They invested heavily in advanced ultra-high voltage transmission lines to seriously upgrade grid capacity, and they tightened oversight considerably. This showed they learned a crucial lesson, that sheer speed could not trump structure and organization. You need both. This whole dynamic has effectively led to what the article calls a bifurcated energy landscape globally. You have two distinct paths emerging. China's state-backed model allows for very low-cost, high-speed deployment at massive scale. Meanwhile, the West often grapples with higher costs, slower permitting, and different implementation challenges due to different economic and regulatory structures. The article leaves us with a really compelling thought. It suggests that the ultimate contest will not be about panels or turbines or climate targets, but who sets the rules of the global energy game. It's a provocative question, isn't it? Will the future of global energy increasingly follow Beijing's centralized, scale-driven blueprint? Or can another credible counter-model emerge to challenge it effectively? Makes you think.
Thank you for listening. If today's deep dive gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting us on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.